Outside the gate of the realm of ruin, many figures, who were being sent out from the realm, appeared. Outside the gate of the realm of ruin, many figures, who were being sent out from the realm, appeared. Strong waves of the will of Wei fluctuated, and many were still in the state of battle. Luo Yue also appeared in another location. She glanced over and assessed the people around her as if she was looking for something. It was not just her, but others were searching, looking toward the space outside the realm of ruin, wanting to find the trace of that mysterious swordsman. That guy was really strong. A rough voice spoke, and it was Deng Hu. His attitude was aggressive, still carrying the battle axe on his back. His eyes swept across all directions of the land and lingered for a moment on quite a few people. He was the true disciple of the city lord of Taishan City, and his talent was considered outstanding, but he was defeated by someone who came from another realm in the unblemished plane. This type of combat prowess was incredible, especially that last sword strike, which was able to hack away the spiritual soul through sheer air. When the sword will exploded completely, it shook everyone's soul and spirit. It had been as if they were about to be torn apart. In the end, he wiped out all the cultivators with a single sword strike and claimed that a single strike was enough. When did such a powerful person appear in Taishan City? He murmured in his heart. His deep eyes swept across the crowd, but he still couldn't find Yi Futian's trail. Previously, Yi Futian had concealed his face, but his temperament and breath could still be felt. At this time, amongst those who appeared outside the realm of ruin, there was no trace. "Are you still here?" At this time, a voice spoke up. It was Luo Yue. Those who participated in the battle and the onlookers in the realm of ruin obviously knew who she was referring to, but many people outside the realm of ruin were somewhat puzzled. Who was the princess looking for? No one responded. It was exceptionally quiet outside the realm of ruin. Did anyone saw a swordsman coming out of the gate of the realm of ruin? Lin Yuan asked the onlookers. If he had come out, then those who were outside of the realm of ruin must have seen him. Many people shook their heads. They had only seen a group of people being sent out one after another, but no one behaved like a swordsman. Just now I was outside the gate of the realm of ruin. All of you almost came out one after another, and there were many, someone remarked. Many who watched the battle before knew that there was nothing to see inside, so they came out. So, he should still be there? Lin Yuan's eyes were sharp, sweeping across the surrounding crowd, but he still could not find him. Your swordsmanship was excellent. Why not show yourself? Luo Yue continued to implore. I actually saw that among all who had come out earlier, someone left quietly, seemingly good at the way of space. An older man, who stood in the void, said. Luo Yue's face turned grave. Someone left? Yes. The old man nodded. This man came out with everyone else, and left directly through space, masking his breath. Even his face was obscured. It's most likely him. Luo Yue's look changed slightly. Why was this man so mysterious? Was there something that he could not reveal? This person's swordsmanship was superb. He must come from a famous clan. Is it possible for Princess Luo Yue to guess who he is? Someone asked. They were also one of the cultivators who was vanquished by Yi Futian. As the lady of the city lord's office at Taishan City, she was bound to be well-informed and know some powerful figures with great swordsmanship. Sword technique that attacks the spiritual soul, Luo Yue mumbled. The strongest swordsman in Taishan region was on Taishan Mountain, but as far as I know, there was no such disciple on Taishan Mountain. Taishan Mountain was where the master, the city lord of Taishan City, cultivated. The sacred land of Taishan region had the strongest sword techniques, but Taishan Mountain did not have such a cultivator. Not to mention, if the other was someone who cultivated at Taishan Mountain, there was no need for disguise. The other seemed to use the realm of ruin as a place of trial, and maybe he will come again tomorrow, next to Luo Yue, her younger sister said. Luo Yue nodded. From the realm of ruin, someone came out again. They were two disciples of Taishan Tavern, and they both walked toward Luo Yue, saying, Did Junior's sister cross sword with that swordsman? Luo Yue nodded. How was it? Asked the youth. Very strong. Luo Yue nodded, causing the youth to show a color of surprise. He said, Too bad I missed it. You didn't miss anything, junior brother Ma. You wouldn't be able to fight him either, Deng Hu said next to him. The young man looked at Deng Hu, as he was the junior brother Ma referred to by Deng Hu. His name was Ma Yi, and like Deng Hu, they were both from Taishan Mountain, so he could be considered Deng Hu's junior brother. This person is very strong, Luo Yue said, looking at Ma. All of us at Taishan Mountain must work hard to cultivate. Ma Yi looked at Luo Yue, somewhat surprised. This junior sister of his was the precious daughter of the city lord, who had a lofty heart and was extremely proud. Her talent was outstanding, and listening to her tone, it seemed that the battle that took place previously had touched her deeply. If you say so, then he must be really strong. If there is chance, I must meet him, said Ma Yi. Now, there is an interesting person in Taishan Tavern who was very good at guqin and played superbly. Even for us, we would be entranced by it. Are you interested in listening? Luo Yue was slightly surprised. Though she was a fan of music, she had just seen such an outstanding swordsman. She did not have much interest in music right at this moment. Uncle hasn't been to the tavern for a long time because of the many affairs he was handling, so I would like to invite junior sister and 2 senior brothers to catch up at the tavern, Ma Yi continued. The woman beside him gave him a look. Ma Yi was really trying hard to court his junior sister. But as a woman, she was more sensitive, and as a bystander, she could see that Luo Yue didn't share his feelings at all. What's more, even if Luo Yue had these thoughts, the person she would choose must be a disciple who cultivated with the masters on Taishan Mountain or the best among the branches of their clan. Ma Yi's talent, good though it was, left much to be desired, falling short of Luo Yue's expectations and standards. Very well, we may as well take this opportunity to visit Uncle. Luo Yue nodded gently, and the group departed, heading toward Taishan Tavern. In an attic behind Taishan Tavern, Yi Futian sat cross-legged, his eyes closed in meditation. Thanks to these days of cultivation, his swordsmanship finally made a breakthrough, and he was able to wield the sword of the broken soul. Next, if he concentrated and solidified his comprehension, his swordsmanship would not be less than his other abilities. This way, as a musical swordmaster, it would be enough for him to take firm root in the upper heavens realm. Celestial Gate of Vast Heaven had mobilized the Super Grand Matrix to move the Fei clan, but all the cultivators were sent to different locations. He had no idea how many people were in the upper heavens realm. Even if there were many, how vast was the upper heavens realm? Now, they could only each work hard on their own to cultivate. In this situation, he had to act cautiously. Otherwise, if the people of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty got wind of his whereabouts, they would undoubtedly send Renhuang cultivators to come and kill him. Even the Overlord himself would issue the license to kill. After Brahma Sky City, the determination of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty to kill him had become extremely strong. Presently, he had no idea of the whereabouts of the master, eldest senior brother, Wuchen, and Xia Qingyuan. It was good fortune that Yu Xing was cultivating at the Dragon Gods. If Yu Xing came out of closed cultivation and learned of the news related to them, perhaps he would be angry. But Yu Xing was discreet, he was not worried. Is young Master Shen here? At this moment, a crystalline voice was heard, and Yi Futian got up and looked down below. He saw a beautiful woman standing there. It was the woman who had been with her brother, Lingling. I am, Yi Futian replied. Today, the master is hosting a banquet to entertain a distinguished guest. Could young master add to the occasion with your music? The woman smiled and asked. It was not that she did not respect Yi Futian, but that Yi Futian was the tavern's musician. Now, the house master of the tavern was having a banquet. For him to play was just part of his responsibility. Moreover, although he was only a musician in the tavern, everyone was respectful and polite to him. At least, on the surface, the disciples of the house master had not been rude to him. This was a presentation of their level and breeding. Very well, Yi Futian nodded and walked out of the attic and came to Lingling's side. Thank you, young Master Shen. Lingling nodded with a smile, then led the way. The two quickly came to the banquet site. When Yi Futian saw the guest, there was a slight disturbance in his eyes, but no one had noticed. This guest was someone he had just met not too long ago. It was Luo Yue. The house master of Taishan Tavern sat at the head, and this was the first time for Yi Futian. To his surprise, the housemaster of Taishan Tavern was an empress, who was elegant, noble, and full of grace. Common men hardly dared to look at her directly, but her eyes were very gentle, and she glanced at Yi Futian. "Greetings to the housemaster." Yi Futian bowed his head to pay his respect. He had heard that the housemaster of Taishan Tavern was the junior brother of Lord Taishan, but he had not heard any mention of her gender before. "Sit," the housemaster said casually. "Thank you, housemaster." Yi Futian nodded and found his place. He then took out his guqin. The sound of guqin was heard instantly. It was extremely ethereal, quiet, and soothing. "Has uncle heard of anyone who is an expert at this kind of swordsmanship?" Lu Yue asked the housemaster. Apparently, she was talking about what had happened in the realm of ruin. Although his disciples couldn't possibly be in the Taishan region, nor would he deliberately hide his identity, the housemaster replied. "So, is it possible that it was a casual cultivator?" Lu Yue continued. "I am not sure," he said with a smile. "I didn't expect that there would be a swordsman that would be unforgettable to you. I just felt that it would be a pity if such a swordsman did not cultivate at Taishan Mountain," Lu Yue said in a low voice. "Indeed, there are a lot of top-notch methods over there," the housemaster smiled and said. "Her master was Lord Taishan, a legendary man in the upper heavens realm who collected the treasures of the world. Some said that Lord Taishan was the cultivator who had the most extensive collection in all of the upper heavens realm. But Lu Yue, don't mind it too much. A truly excellent person will show their brilliance sooner or later. It can't be hidden," the housemaster continued with a smile. She cast a glance casually at Yi Futian. This musician in her tavern was not a simple character. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Lu Yue didn't think much of it and continued to chat about other things for a while. "I heard that the heavenly mandate realm has undergone major changes, with top principalities starting fights. Has uncle heard of this?" Lu Yue suddenly asked again. "But if you are interested, why not ask your father?" asked the housemaster of Taishan Tavern. "He has been out cultivating practicing recently," Lu Yue responded. "Is that so?" Several months ago, a great battle did erupt in the heavenly mandate realm. The celestial gate of vast heaven, heavenly mandate dynasty, and the violet heavenly palace suffered a considerable impact. Moreover, Tianyu, the crown prince of the heavenly mandate dynasty, had been cultivating at violet heavenly palace, and is said to possess outstanding talent. "The swordsman you saw in the realm of ruin may not measure up to his level," the housemaster said. Lu Yue nodded. How many geniuses were there in the land of the 9 realms? Even Taishan Mountain had some enthralling characters. The swordsman in the realm of ruin was indeed very strong, but whether or not he could compare with those at the peak was something else. "Perhaps," Lu Yue whispered. "Lu Yue, what do you think of the guqin?" the housemaster of Taishan Tavern asked. Lu Yue turned her attention to Yi Futian, who was playing quietly. Yi Futian lowered his head while strumming the strings. It was as if he was completely unaware of the conversation between the two. His music had already completely integrated into the mood of the banquet. If no one had mentioned it, Lu Yue had almost forgotten it. It was not that the music was poor, but that it was so elegant that it lured the listeners into feeling that it was part of the banquet, just like the wine and food. "It's remarkable, but hard to pinpoint just what made it so breathtaking," Lu Yue replied in a low voice. She glanced at the musician. His temperament was gentle and graceful, extremely handsome. Though he seemed to be quite ordinary in some ways, he was particularly striking, just like his music. Young Master Shin is the tavern's musician, and guests of the tavern all praise his superb skills, the woman next to her said with a smile. Great truths are always simple. The housemaster of Taishan Tavern smiled. She looked at her disciple and asked, "What's his name?" She didn't directly ask Yi Futian, clearly because she didn't want to interrupt his cultivation, and she also wanted to test his concentration. "Master, his name is Shinjing," the woman responded in a low voice. Shinjing, simple and unassuming. The name is just like the person. The house master of Taishan smiled. At this time, Yi Futian's music slowed down as he came to a complete stop. He bowed his head slightly and said, "Elder's praise is hardly deserved by Shenjing." The house master of Taishan looked at Yi Futian and smiled. To play the music without being distracted, your music reflects your emotional state, gentle and humble, handsome and full of grace. But humility itself is a different kind of pride. You must have seen and experienced many things. She was also a lover of the guqin, or she would not have hired a musician in the tavern. With her current cultivation, she was able to detect someone's personality from their music. Although she did not exhibit her authority and majesty, she was a well-known character within the Taishan region. Even in the entire higher heavens realm, disciples of Lord Taishan were high in rank, never mind just Taishan region. Those who were ordinary would feel a trace of restraint when they met her, but Yi Futian's music sounded extremely stable. No trace of unsteadiness could be detected. The identity of this musician was probably more than what met the eye. Of course, she did not have much interest in digging. No matter what his true identity was or whether or not he deliberately approached her, it didn't matter much. In Taishan region, no one dared to plot against her. This was a kind of self-confidence. Lord Taishan, whose status in the higher heavens realm was known by all. Yi Futian quietly acknowledged the other. He did not expect that by playing a simple song quietly, he had allowed the other to see so much. Here is a little small something for a talent like you. When the opportunity arises, I will recommend you for a tryout at Taishan Mountain, the house master continued with a smile. She did not intend for Yi Futian to respond, which surprised the others at the banquet. Luo Yue also gave Yi Futian a serious look. Although she could feel the excellence of the music, was Yi Futian's music that outstanding? Taishan Mountain was a holy land of the upper heavens realm. Everyone there was not simple. Even if there were to be a musician there, only the top ones could qualify. Obviously, her uncle greatly appreciated Yi Futian's musical ability, hence the thought of recommending him to Taishan Mountain. Ma Yi and the other also looked at Yi Futian with some surprise. Clearly, they did not expect their master to have this idea. Yi Futian himself also regarded the other party with some surprise and saw a smile from the house master of Taishan when she looked into his eyes. It seemed that his mood could still be affected. When Yi Futian detected the eyes of the other, he immediately collected his thoughts and replied, "Much gratitude for elder's commendation. I only said that I would recommend you. Whether or not you can go to Taishan Mountain stills depend on your level." The house master of Taishan smiled. But Luo Yue knew that since her uncle had spoken, there was not much of a chance that this matter wouldn't go as she wished. Her uncle was the youngest disciple of the Grandmaster and was also a woman. Because the Grandmaster mainly spoiled her, the Lord of Taishan, her wishes, especially for such trivial matters, wouldn't even be questioned. Yi Futian nodded slightly only to hear the other party continue, "You are an expert in melody. Have you heard that Taishan Mountain has one of the 10 famous divine melodies in Divine Prefecture? If you were able to enter Taishan Mountain, perhaps you may have the opportunity to experience it." Yi Futian had never heard of such a thing, but after all, he had just arrived and could not have known about so many things here. His dark eyes gazed at the house master of Taishan Tavern. Yi Futian got up and bowed slightly. "As you wish," the house master of Taishan smiled casually. "I will bid my goodbye." Yi Futian turned and left, and there was a slight turmoil in his heart. After he came to Taishan Tavern, he had rarely communicated with the others. He had only exchanged a few words with Ma Yi and his junior sister. Yi Futian understood that those two were the disciples of the house master of Taishan Tavern, whose status in Taishan City was very notable. Although they were appreciative of his musical ability, it was more out of curiosity, and they didn't care too much about his existence. As for the house master of Taishan Tavern, he did not even know that it was a woman, only that the house master of Taishan was a disciple of Lord Taishan. Obviously, he did not anticipate that the house master of Taishan would see through him so clearly. What was even more surprising to him was that the house master of Taishan knew of his intent, but still didn't seem to mind. She even actively wanted to help him, which made him somewhat thoughtful. There were many legends and geniuses in this world, and one should never be too full of oneself. The truth was that were many who were much smarter than himself. Futian came to Taishan Tavern as a musician, indeed aiming for Taishan Mountain. Only at the top places could the best people be met and the best view be had, which would only be that much more helpful for cultivation. But he never expected that the house master of Taishan Tavern would recommend and introduce him so quickly. After Yi Futian left, everyone at the banquet looked at the house master of Taishan with surprise. Ma Yi asked in a puzzled way, "Master really intends to recommend Shinjing to Taishan Mountain?" The house master of Taishan nodded. As far as she was concerned, she would not deceive a younger, junior person. Yi Futian also understood that in front of a powerful Renhuang, there was no value in deceiving him. But master, why? Ma Yi didn't quite understand. Just as Yi Futian thought, although Ma Yi was very curious about him, he didn't really consider him to be at the same level. Even Ma Yi could not enter Taishan Mountain to cultivate. Luo Yue and the others were also puzzled. Although the musician's performance was outstanding, would it worth introducing him to Taishan Mountain? This tavern has been in operation for many years. Many people from various walks of life have been through here. This is the first time I've seen this man, but his melody revealed many things that the eyes cannot see. Shen Jing gave me a feeling that he has more than meets the eye, and I want to see if I am right or wrong, she smiled and said. Uncle was aware that he wanted to enter Taishan Mountain? Lin Yuan asked. Obviously, he was a bit more astute. The house master of Taishan nodded. If he came intending to enter, then why does uncle still help him? Louis West. Cultivators of the world, which one of them does not have a purpose? Take you, for instance. Which one of you doesn't want to enter Taishan Mountain to cultivate? The house master of Taishan smiled. Don't worry too much about that as long as it doesn't affect you. Besides, it was only as a musician, not as a disciple of Taishan Mountain. What he can accomplish in Taishan Mountain will depend on his own efforts and abilities, and it also confirms my judgment. It is a minimal effort to help others, so why begrudge it? And I will still receive his gratitude. Luo Yue has been enlightened. Luo Yue nodded slightly when she heard those words and lost in thoughts. According to her father, her uncle's talent for cultivation was extremely high. From this small matter today, she could see uncle's generosity. It's late. Luo Yue, are you staying here at the tavern for a few days, or are you going back to the city lord's office? Asked the house master of Taishan. Luo Yue will not disturb uncle's cultivation, Luo Yue replied. The group got up and bid their goodbyes and left. What happened today touched Luo Yue in her heart. One instance was with that swordsman in the realm of ruin, who defeated all others in the Saint Plain with a single blow. Then, there was what she had just seen in the tavern. Although it seemed inconsequential, she could still learn from it. As the night descended, the tavern was bathed in the quiet beauty of the night sky. Somewhere in an attic of the tavern, sounds of the guqin playing could be heard, which seemed to add more color to Taishan Tavern. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Taishan region was named after Lord Taishan. This territory was, in reality, the territory of Lord Taishan. It was not necessarily his intention that it was this way, but when a person grew strong enough, many things tended to happen naturally. Taishan region was named after Lord Taishan. This territory was, in reality, the territory of Lord Taishan. It was not necessarily his intention that it was this way, but when a person grew strong enough, many things tended to happen naturally. Moreover, Lord Taishan himself did not have the idea of creating a territory. Otherwise, Taishan region would have been even greater. Now, Taishan region was composed of 3 main territories, which were the 3 major forces. The main city, Taishan City, was next to Taishan Mountain. Because of its close proximity to Taishan Mountain, it was the core of the region, and the city lord was the second disciple of Lord Taishan. Furthermore, the youngest disciple of Lord Taishan was also located in this city, the house master of Taishan Tavern. Among the 2 other territories, one was created by Lord Taishuan's eldest disciple, who created Taishuanism, and was hailed as the Taishan Hierophant. The Taishan Hierophant was also the eldest disciple of Lord Taishan. After so many years, the territory of Taishuanism was now the largest in Taishan region. It long surpassed that of Taishan city, and its influence was great, with many powerful characters within the cult. Lord Taishan no longer bothered with matters of the outside world, so Taishuanism was considered the primary principality of the Taishan region. And another force was created by the third disciple of Lord Taishan. It was named String Palace, and this disciple was named Emperor of String. This was the only one that did not have the name of Taishan. But even so, the branch of Taishan had long been the absolute ruler in this territory. Futian had carefully researched the specific situation of Lord Taishan these past few days. Previously, he didn't even know the gender of the house master of Taishan but had just assumed male as a matter of course, which was careless on his part. Fortunately, he had no dishonorable motives, so it did not affect anything. Since that day, he had not been to the realm of the ruin again, which made Luoyue, who had been searching there for many days, a little disappointed. And it was not just Luoyue, but many others were eager to find him but to no avail. The mysterious swordsman had completely disappeared after that glorious battle, and not been heard from again. This caused many chatter among the people of Taishan city. The mysterious swordsman who had a glorious moment in Taishan city, would he appear again? However, Futian was unaware of all this. He spent most of these days cultivating quietly and practicing music. In fact, he rarely practiced music as he had before. On this day, Futian finally had an opportunity. The house master of Taishan was going to Taishan Mountain to visit her master, Lord Taishan. In addition to her few disciples, Futian was also included. There was a Fey mountain in the higher heavens, named Taishan, which rose into the sky and shines with the sun and the moon. Taishan Mountain was extremely famous only because of one person, Lord Taishan. On the ethereal and misty Taishan Mountain, it was exceptionally quiet. Although there were also many cultivators, the expanse of Taishan Mountain made these many celestial palaces seem tranquil and solitary. Many on the mountain got up and paid their respects when they saw the house master of Taishan. After all, Lord Taishan ever only had 4 disciples, and the 4 disciples had already achieved fame to exhibit their excellence. The house master of Taishan was the youngest in age and ranking only because her cultivation was a little lesser. But even so, she was a big name in the higher heavens realm, so no one dared neglect her. The house master of Taishan came all the way to the core area of Taishan Mountain. Above the sky in front of her, there was an unworldly celestial palace. She stopped outside the palace, and in front of her, an old man came forward and bowed slightly to the house master of Taishan. He was very polite and said with a smile, "Miss 4 is here." "Uncle Lon," the house master Taishan responded with a smile, addressing him as Uncle, showing equal respect. Uncle Lon was also a Renhuang who had been in the service of Lord Taishan for many years. Even when they were cultivating with Lord Taishan, the old man was already at their master's side. Although the old man acted as a steward in Taishan Mountain, he was considered a close and personal valet of Lord Taishan. No one dared to disrespect him. In fact, since it was not possible for Lord Taishan to manage outside matters, he was in charge. Therefore, the old man was addressing her as Miss 4 because, after all, he had watched the house master of Taishan grow into an empress. "Master is not in retreat, is he?" the house master of Taishan asked with a smile. "No, you came just in time. Great teacher came to visit my lord as well," Uncle Lon said with a smile. His words stunned the house master of Taishan. Although her perception was extremely powerful, she could not spy on the household of his master with divine spirit. That would be disrespectful. The great teacher was her eldest senior brother, the chief disciple of Lord Taishan, who was now known as the Taishan Hierophant and was also the strongest among the 4 of them. Disciple Jun Mu greets uncle. At this time, a young man with extraordinary temperament came over and bowed slightly toward the house master of Taishan. Jun Mu, a disciple of Taishan Hierophant. "Is the eldest senior brother here to ask the master regarding matters of cultivation?" asked the house master of Taishan. "If so, I will visit master another day." Behind them, Futian watched quietly, and a trace of doubt appeared in his heart as he watched the scene played out. Was there discord between House Master of Taishan and her eldest senior brother? She should be happy to see her senior brother here. Why would she want to leave? Linger is here, a voice called out. Yi Futian saw a middle-aged man walking forward. His stride was great with each step he took, and he was wearing a loose robe. The breath coming from his body was calm and peaceful, his face was smiling, and his body was full of an unfathomable atmosphere. The Taishan Hierophant, the eldest disciple of Lord Taishan. There were not many who would dare to refer to the House Master of Taishan by her maiden name. Eldest senior brother, the House Master of Taishan smiled and said, "If I knew you were here to visit the Master, I would not have disturbed your visit. I am only to check in with Master this time. Master knew that you were coming and asked me to come and welcome you, and you actually tried to slip away. Am I that scary?" The voice of Taishan Hierophant was strong and powerful. Yi Futian faintly felt that the Taishan Hierophant's plane was extremely high. "Not at all, I'm only afraid that it will disturb the discussion between Master and senior brother." The House Master of Taishan smiled and then looked at Uncle Lon next to her. "Uncle Lon, I met a musician at the tavern whose art was excellent. Would you take him to see if he may stay on Taishan Mountain as a musician?" Uncle Lon didn't ask who he was but just smiled and nodded. "Fine. Shenjing, come over and meet Uncle Lon." The House Master of Taishan looked back at Yi Futian and said. Yi Futian stepped forward and bowed slightly toward Uncle Lon. "Greetings from Shenjing to the Honorable Elder." Uncle Lan's eyes fell on him, and his eyes contained some deeper meaning. He moved his eyes away and smiled. "Rest assured, Miss Four, I will handle it." The House Master of Taishan also glanced at Yi Futian. It was just a look without any emotion, but Yi Futian felt an invisible pressure of might. Suddenly he had a feeling. Could there be more to the story? "Brother, let's go to see the Master," the House Master Taishan said with a smile. They then left together and walked toward that celestial palace. Yi Futian raised his head and looked at the palace, where there was a giant figure in the higher heaven realm, which would also be the first top power he was close to in the higher heaven. The eyes of Jun Mu, the disciple of the Taishan Hierophant, fell on Yi Futian. He said politely, "I am the disciple of the Taishan Hierophant, Jun Mu." Yi Futian didn't understand the other's motive, but on Taishan Mountain he wouldn't make the mistake of acting arrogant, so he also replied with respect, "Musician of Taishan Tavern, Shenjing." Brother Shen was able to get a personal introduction into Taishan Mountain from Uncle, which means your talent must be extremely unusual, Jun Mu said. "Not enough to be compared to the disciple of the Hierophant." Yi Futian responded evasively, as there was no easy answer to give. "If there is ever an opportunity, I must experience your music," Jun Mu said, which surprised Yi Futian. The word experience contained double meanings. One was the pure appreciation of the music. The second was learning from each other. Musicians in the world of cultivation cultivated in Guqin path. Thus, the appreciation of music could also mean battle. What Jun Mu meant was more like the latter. "Of course." Yi Futian feigned ignorance and nodded with a smile. No matter which one he meant, it didn't matter. "Young Master Shin, come with me," Uncle Lon said at this time. Yi Futian nodded and then left with Uncle Lon while the other disciples who came with the house master were waiting outside. Ma Yi couldn't help but glance at Yi Futian, feeling a little envious. Yi Futian had the opportunity to cultivate at Taishan Mountain. Uncle Lon and Yi Futian were walking, and Yi Futian had some doubts but found it inappropriate to inquire at this moment. After all, he was just a musician, not yet qualified to ask anything about Taishan Mountain. "You have questions?" Uncle Lon looked at Yi Futian and asked with a smile. "Some," Yi Futian nodded. "Speak less, observe more." Uncle Lon smiled and didn't tell him anything else. They came to a place with two words written outside, String Pavilion. The String Pavilion was very quiet. Although it was quaint, it was very clean. In the String Pavilion, Yi Futian saw many gyukins. On some of them he even felt the will of the way. There were also many prestigious gyukins. In addition, there were also many musical scores on the shelves. This place was very elegant. Although it was unoccupied, it felt like it was not devoid of a master. "What is this place?" Yi Futian looked at Uncle Lon. This is the place where the third young master cultivated before. Now whenever the third young master returns to Taishan Mountain, this is where he stays. Everything here was left by the third young master. You will stay here from now on and take care of the string pavilion and these gyukins. Of course, you can also play them, and you are welcome to peruse these music scores, Uncle Lon said with a smile. Among them, there are quite a few famous ones. The former residence of the String Emperor, Yi Futian secretly exclaimed, a little surprised. His first time at Taishan Mountain as a musician, and he was receiving such great treatment? He hadn't considered all of that before and just wanted to start as an ordinary musician regardless of his status. Elder, there are no tests? Yi Futian asked. Uncle Lon shook his head with a smile. Miss Four introduced Yi Futian, so he understood the implications of that. Take good care of the string pavilion. You can use it and you can read, but you are not allowed to destroy the things inside. As Uncle Lon was speaking, he left, leaving Yi Futian there. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. After Uncle Lon left, Yi Futian was left alone in the string pavilion. He was still in a trance. After Uncle Lon left, Yi Futian was left alone in the string pavilion. He was still in a trance. He had thought that it would take a long time to come to this absolute holy land in Taishan region, observe the cultivation of the people in this holy land, and make contact with its top characters. He did not expect everything to progress so fast just because of a few words from the House Master of Taishan. But when he learned that the House Master of Taishan was one of Lord Taishuan's 4 disciples, he was relieved. But this favor would not be easy to return. Although, officially, he was only the musician caretaker of the string pavilion, Yi Futian was not so ignorant. He could use any of the gyukins at will and peruse the music scores collected here. What kind of good fortune was this? Many geniuses of Taishan region had difficulty even getting to Taishan Mountain, let alone guarding the string pavilion. The string pavilion was very spacious. Many gyukins were hanging everywhere, and as to the music scores on the bookshelves, Yi Futian took some and started reading them, soon becoming absorbed. His accomplishment in music was extraordinary, but the fact was that he had a solid foundation of spiritual will, and he had cultivated in divine melody and demon songs. As for his overall accomplishment in Guqin, there was still a lot of room for improvement. After all, he had only studied Guqin when he was a youngster, and his knowledge at the time was limited. And now, everything in this pavilion seemed to open up another door for him. Yi Futian entered a trance and was unaware of the passing of time or whether or not the House Master Taishan had already departed. However, she should not ask for him again, as her intention was to send him to Taishan Mountain. The string pavilion also had a backyard. In the backyard, there were ancient mounds connected together. There were many man-made caves and flattened stone platforms. There were traces left by previous occupants everywhere, which were probably left by the String Emperor when he cultivated here. Yi Futian's body flickered and came to the edge of a mountain. In front of him was a sea of clouds. The clouds were misty, beautiful, and ethereal, and the scenery was magnificent and out of this world. But suddenly, a radiant figure emerged from the sea of clouds. Its brilliant wings illuminated heaven and earth. Colorful streams of light, along with divine light flowed. It was a divine bird. Yi Futian was stunned to see that it was a phoenix. Read more chapter on novel full. The phoenix glanced at Yi Futian, and there seemed to be some surprise in those rebellious eyes. It then turned around and flew away. In the vast sea of clouds in the distance, clouds and fog tossed and tumbled with the occasional appearance of divine creatures, blue cranes, fire phoenixes, and such. There was also an ancient guqin on the cliff by the sea. This ancient guqin was engraved with the pattern of phoenix. It was a phoenix guqin. There were several large characters carved into the giant stone next to it. Flight of the Phoenix Pair. There is something here. Yi Futian waved his sleeves, wiping away the dust. Below the carving of the words Flight of the Phoenix Pair, lines of ancient golden characters were revealed, just like musical notes, imprinted directly into his mind. It was the music score. Yi Futian sat cross-legged and was quietly absorbing the music score. After a long while, He opened his eyes and came to the guqin, placing his palms on the strings. Accompanied by the movement of his fingers, the rhythm fluctuated. It was like the chanting of Phoenix, crystal clear. The guqin played slowly. Its sound drifted toward the sea of clouds. The sea of clouds rolled in the distance. The bright streaming light came toward this place as if a divine bird, the phoenix, appeared, hovering above the sea of clouds, its eyes focused on Yi Futian. The notes flickered and penetrated its mind, but its eyes did not waver, but it still focused on Yi Futian. Finally, as if it couldn't help it any longer, a voice came out of its mouth. It's awful. The sound of the guqin came to an abrupt stop. Yi Futian turned back to look at the phoenix. He was a little embarrassed. He was despised by this phoenix. Sorry, I haven't mastered this piece of music yet, Yi Futian said awkwardly. This flight of the phoenix pair was a song of the phoenix guqin and could resonate with the phoenix, but clearly he had failed. In fact, when he was perusing the music score, Yi Futian thought of Ling, the dragon master. They could communicate with the dragons by the sound of music and create resonance, allowing them to control the true dragons directly and even release their abilities through the true dragon. This was the talent of the dragon master. And this flight of the phoenix pair was similar but even more exquisite. I just needed to practice more, Yi Futian continued when he saw there was no response from the other. Just don't torment me anymore, the phoenix uttered in a human voice. It said with annoyance, several other places have the same unusual guqin and music. You could just go and cultivate there instead. Yi Futian was speechless. This bird really hated him. Every guqin is accompanied by its own piece of music? Yi Futian asked. How capricious. Well, some were obtained by String Emperor's predecessors, and some were made by his own hands. You are still far from that level, the phoenix said. His eyes proud, looking at Yi Futian, he said, Here, there are 6 prestigious songs left, which can all evoke visions, but it is not so easy to learn. Your attainments are too shallow and are not yet enough. My skill is poor? Yi Futian was kind of depressed. This was the first time someone had questioned his musical skill. Very poor, Phoenix said bluntly. How poor? Yi Futian looked really confused. Unbearable, Phoenix responded. Yi Futian's eyes lingered on this phoenix. A great demon phoenix of true self-plane, he could easily overcome. It had been a long time since he had unleashed on anyone. Mom, Dad, some people want to hit me, the phoenix sent out a cry into the far distance. Instantly, in the depth of the sea of clouds, 2 phoenix cries were heard, loud and clear. A mighty demon emperor swept through, looming over the heavens, and there was a strong pressure of the great path appearing above the sky, landing on Yi Futian across the endless and distant land. Yi Futian badly wanted to give the other a beating, but the tone of his voice changed immediately. He said with a smile, Beautiful Phoenix, we can discuss this. Did this girl call on her parents? Was this fair? The fact that there were 2 phoenix demon emperors deep in the sea of clouds, what would this mean for the future? No wonder Taishan Mountain was really a sacred place. There were demon phoenixes in its backyard. Wasn't this great? Yi Futian thought that when he got to this state in the future, he would also raise a great, big horde. That would be really cool. How do you know that I am beautiful? The phoenix's body was dazzling with divine light. She turned into a human form. Her figure, after she shifted into human form, was perfect. Her skin was delicate, and her body was covered in a fiery red feather robe made of divine feathers. She was an extremely sexy woman, hot as fire. I know it just by the voice, Yi Futian said seriously. He couldn't afford to aggravate her. As the progeny of 2 great demon emperors and born in Taishan Mountain, this little phoenix was probably created with the best between heaven and earth. Even though her cultivation was of the Saint Plane, but she still behaved like a young girl. Even Kong Xian, who was also the descendant of the demon peacock emperor, was still unable to compare with this one. Smart guy. The little phoenix assessed Yi Futian seriously, then said, You look pretty good. Are you the disciple of String Emperor? No, Yi Futian shook his head. You are not secretly coming here to cultivate on Taishan Mountain, are you? If so, I suggest you leave immediately, the little phoenix advised. Uncle Lon allowed me to come here, Yi Futian replied. Is that so? The little phoenix's beautiful eyes moved around as if thinking about something. No one had been to the string pavilion for a long time. Now that someone was here to play music, it would be alleviated of some of its boredom. My name is Feng Yan. What is yours? Xinjing, Yi Futian replied. Feng Yan, just as expected, your name is as beautiful as your person. Feng Yan revealed a bright smile, and Yi Futian secretly felt a little guilty. Little girls were so easy to appease. Feng Yan, can you tell me a little bit about the situation here? Yi Futian asked. Sure. Feng Yan agreed readily, but just then, a wave of heavenly might descended. A voice was heard, Feng Yan, it's time to cultivate. Feng Yan's face collapsed in an instant. Above the void, a phantom figure of a phoenix appeared, looking down at Yi Futian. Xinjing greets the honorable elder. Yi Futian saluted slightly. If Mr. Lon let you cultivate here, then focus on cultivating in quiet and don't disappoint Mr. Lon. That phoenix spoke casually, her voice full of authority and majesty. She then took Feng Yan to leave. As Yi Futian had suspected, Feng Yan's birth was exceptional. She had been born after both of her parents had become emperors, further blessed by spiritual treasure given by Lord Taixin. Feng Yan was born as a congenital saint and could reach saint plane through the natural process of growth. This was a talent only possessed by divine beasts, impossible for humans to achieve. Therefore, according to the comparison between the Phoenix clan and humans, Feng Yan was very young. This young one was very mischievous. However, if Mr. Lon arranged it, she would not do anything. Yi Futian watched the other leave and felt a little bummed out. Since Feng Yan had always been here, she must know a lot about the string pavilion and Taixin Mountain. If he could have coaxed her to stay, it would save him a lot of trouble. However, the looks from that female phoenix were pretty fierce. Crap, Yi Futian mumbled. He could only mumble slowly to himself. He looked at this area. 6 famous songs. It seemed that he would not be bored on this Taixin Mountain. Thus, Yi Futian cultivated alone in the string pavilion, as if forgotten by everyone else. No one paid attention to his existence, and he was happy to be by himself. Feng Yan would occasionally come to see him secretly, exchanging a word or two. However, that female phoenix guarded him like he was a thief or something, which really upset Yi Futian. Was he that kind of person? Although Yi Futian was not disturbed, many cultivators on Taixin Mountain knew of his existence. After all, he became the only guardian of the string pavilion. This position was coveted by many but was hard to obtain. There were many cultivators on Taixin Mountain, including many geniuses of the younger generations. At this time, upon Taixin Mountain, a group was discussing. Yesterday, I passed by the string pavilion and heard the sound of the guqin inside. It should be the musician who was sent over by Miss Four? Someone said. Xinjing, what is the background of this person? Someone asked curiously. Everyone shook their heads, and one of them said, it was said that he was a musician at Taixin Tavern, and because Miss Four valued his talent in music, she took him up the mountain. Mr. Lon arranged for him to stay at the String Pavilion. String Pavilion, on Taixin Mountain, is the place that many yearn for. Why would someone who had just entered Taixin Mountain can cultivate N String Pavilion? When he spoke, he looked at a young man next to him. That young man was also a cultivator of Guqin Path, whose attainment was great, but still, there was no such opportunity for him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. String Pavilion, Rear Mountain, upon the stone platform among the sea of clouds. String Pavilion, Rear Mountain, upon the stone platform among the sea of clouds. Yi Futian was sitting cross-legged, playing a musical composition. As the sound of music rose, every note that jumped out was akin to the chanting of the phoenix. There was a brilliant divine light accompanying each lively note. If someone was here, they were bound to have the false sense that it was the phoenix singing. The sound of the guqin sounded like a phoenix chanting. Those notes surrounded Yi Futian's body, and in the void, There were illusions of the phoenix, whirling between heaven and earth. In the sea of clouds, an extremely radiant divine light illuminated, like a picture of a phoenix dancing in 9 heavens, beautiful and perfect, a wonder in itself. In the distance, the sea of clouds tossed and turned, and the light of the golden flame flowed above the sea of clouds. A long whistle was heard, which echoed with the sound of the guqin. A real phoenix god bird rushed out of the sea of clouds, surging upward, its wings spread, flying directly toward Yi Futian. Yi Futian seemed unaware, still playing in meditation. The sound of the guqin continued, as did the sound of phoenix chanting. Countless notes flowed into the mind of the phoenix and resonated with it. In this moment, Yi Futian seemed to be able to perceive the emotion of the phoenix, even borrowing from its spiritual will. There was a smile on the corner of his mouth, but his 10 slender fingers were still playing as the little phoenix flew around him. The shadows of the phoenix danced in the sky between heaven and earth, intertwining into a beautiful painting, just like a veritable wonderland. The little phoenix was extremely cheerful. Her voice was clear and ethereal, singing in harmony with the sound of guqin. After a long while, when the music slowly stopped, she stopped her dancing and flying, then landed beside Yi Futian, shifting into her human form. The flight of the phoenix pair. The little phoenix stared at Yi Futian with her beautiful eyes, a little surprised. She then smiled. "You learn quickly." In just over a month, Yi Futian had actually mastered the flight of the phoenix pair and was able to induce the vision of heaven and earth, luring the phoenix into its dance, a natural wonder. "That's because I am a genius," Yi Futian quipped jokingly. "Little phoenix, before, when I was playing the music, I could feel the resonance with your spiritual will. Could this help your cultivation?" "Mutual help. If your plane is higher, your spiritual comprehension stronger than mine, then it will help me more. On the contrary, if my plane is higher than yours, it will help you a lot," Little Phoenix said with a smile. Flight of the Phoenix Pair itself was a famous piece created based on the phoenix. It was a lovely song in itself, but if used in combat, its power would be equally strong. "So, you are taking advantage of me," Yi Futian said again. Read more chapter on novel. Full Little Phoenix blushed slightly and stared at Yi Futian, saying, "My plane is temporarily lower than yours, but I'm a natural-born saint. My progression will be rapid. Even Lord Taishan has said that my future is endless, as the definite candidate as the divine phoenix. I'm bound to ride the wind and sail into the 9 heavens. Not to mention, when did I ever say that I would cultivate with you? Fine. It's me who took advantage of you," Yi Futian smiled. After these few days of contact, he and Little Phoenix had gotten familiar with one another. He knew that her temperament was still like a young girl, which made him kind of miss Linga. "That's more like it." Little Phoenix's face was a faint pink as she whispered. But that girl-like face was paired with a perfect figure. It was inexplicably attractive. Fortunately, Yi Futian was already used to it, his mind devoid of other ideas. After all, he was not that kind of person. "Again?" Yi Futian smiled and said, "Yes, yes." Little Phoenix appeared a little excited. It was as if she were a natural fit with the flight of the phoenix pair. "Feng Yan," a voice came from the void, and a bright divine phoenix appeared. It was Feng Yan's mother. She looked at Feng Yan and said, "Let's go." "Oh." Feng Yan suddenly lost her enthusiasm. She gave a quick wink at Yi Futian and then moved toward the sea of clouds. "Elder." Yi Futian saluted the phantom of the divine phoenix in the void, and that phoenix gave him a deep look of assessment. He was able to master the flight of the phoenix pair in such a short time. She felt a little dazed. Once upon a time, when the String Emperor had also played the flight of the phoenix pair here, the husband and wife were the partners of the String Emperor, and they danced with the music. But then, the Emperor went down the mountain and built his own legacy, leaving the two of them here. The phantom illusion of the divine phoenix gradually dissipated, and the little phoenix had also dived into the sea of clouds in the distance. Yi Futian watched those disappearing figures and cursed secretly. So, guarding against thieves? Unfortunately, he couldn't win in this case. Is Brother Shin here? At this moment, A voice that came from outside the string pavilion that penetrated the void and came to this side, falling into Yi Futian's ear. Yi Futian was a little puzzled. For a month, he had been practicing alone in the string pavilion, accompanied only by Guqin, with only the occasional appearances of the little phoenix. This was the first time someone came to visit. Stepping forward, Yi Futian walked toward the string pavilion, came to the front yard, and saw a group of youths there. They were looking at him. The temperament of these people were all very unusual. He knew very well that for those who could enter Taishan Mountain to cultivate, they would not be simple people. Greetings from Xinjing to you all. Yi Futian bowed with his hand together in salute, gentle and polite. Long have we heard the name of Brother Xin. The young man in the middle of the group in front also saluted Yi Futian, saying, Chen Yu of Guqin Valley at Taishan Mountain. Since the news that Miss Four and Mr. Lan sent Brother Xin to the string pavilion for cultivation, we have all been curious. Today we have come to visit personally, and Brother Xin does not disappoint. Although the 4 great disciples of Lord Taishan were already off the mountain to set up their own prospective settlements, there were still many places for cultivation on Taishan Mountain, such as Sword Abyss, Guqin Valley, and Alchemy House, all of which were managed by some elders on Taishan Mountain. They were all early followers of Lord Taishan but lacked the opportunity to become Lord Taishuan's personal disciples. Many years ago, Lord Taishuan's 5 major disciples were also from this group, but later, a disciple had perished, and Lord Taishan vowed never to accept another disciple as long as he lived. Therefore, even though some possessed unusual talent and had received personal guidance from Lord Taishan, he still would not accept them as personal disciples. After the 4 great disciples of Lord Taishan came down the mountain, the Taishan Hierophant would often send some extremely talented geniuses to persuade Lord Taishan to accept them as disciples again, but he never did. Thus, the people of the higher heavens realm gradually began to understand that Lord Taishan would no longer have any more disciples. Guqin Valley was a place for practicing the art of Guqin. Lord Taishan possessed profound knowledge and broad experience. He was an expert at many abilities. The disciples he guided had all become masters of their own rights. Not only that, but Lord Taishuan's collection was also very bountiful. After Yi Futian heard that the visitors came from Guqin Valley, he guessed something. He was not a disciple of Taishan Mountain, and after being sent to Taishan Mountain, he was assigned to guard the string pavilion. This was not treatment available for just anyone. Not even the disciple of Guqin Valley had such good fortune. It occurred to Yi Futian that this was probably how connections worked. Who could imagine it was Miss Four who sent him to the mountain? Or that Lord Taishan only had 4 disciples in total, and Miss Four was the only female disciple, so her status must be greatly exalted? Brother Chen flatters me. I am just a simple musician, who was fortunate enough to be in the care of Miss Four and Elder Lan, and to have this opportunity to guard the string pavilion here. I am not worthy of all you gentlemen visiting me in person. If I can be of service, just let me know and Xinjing will come to you. Yi Futian saw Qin Yu was polite and respectful, so he did not bother to probe the reasons behind it. He figured that to avoid any problems, he just had to be even more humble and low-key than Qin Yu. He didn't come to Taishan Mountain to bring the focus on himself, and he didn't want any trouble. He just wanted to cultivate quietly for a while to improve himself. When everyone heard Yi Futian's words, they gave him a deep and meaningful look. This guy was quite humble, and his voice showed sincerity. Brother Xin is overly humble, and since it was Miss Four who personally sent you to the string pavilion, your attainment of the Guqin must be outstanding, another person said next to him. Not at all. Yi Futian shook his head. I was just a simple musician at Taishan Tavern, and I have no idea why Miss Four would value someone like me. However, it is my honor to have the opportunity to guard the string pavilion, so I will do my best and maintain all the gyukins here. When everyone heard Yi Futian's words, a strange look appeared in their eyes. This guy was so humble and polite, and they could not find any faults with him immediately. No one could outright attack someone so amicable. Shen Jing's attitude was rather impeccable. There are a lot of scores in the string pavilion, you must have read them? At this time, a woman appeared beside Qin Yu, wearing a long skirt, flowing like a goddess. She had an outstanding temperament. She was also a disciple of Guqin Valley. Her name was Liyin. Guqin Valley did not have many disciples nowadays. Qin Yu and Li Jin were among the best. I have read a few, broad and profound, but there are many scores in Guqin Valley. I am afraid that it will be difficult to learn them all in my lifetime, Yi Futian replied. Indeed. Li Jin nodded slightly. I was fortunate enough to be selected to come to Guqin Valley to observe. I have seen 6 famous scores, but after many days of cultivation, I was still just scratching the surface. I found it impossible to induce the phenomenon between heaven and earth. It is a pity. Jin, you are too modest. Back then, your rendition of the flight of the phoenix pair was almost perfect, Qin Yu said. Xinjing, you are now the guardian of the string pavilion. May I enter and take a look? Li Jin asked Yi Futian. Please, Yi Futian smiled and nodded. When Mr. Lan asked him to guard the pavilion, he did not forbid the others from entering. If he declined, it might cause controversy. Even though he was invited by the house master of Taishan to enter Taishan Mountain, he still didn't want to attract unnecessary attention, nor did he want to arouse hatred from others. All of them entered into the string pavilion, and Li Jin went straight to the sea of clouds in the rear mountain. A sense of longing was visible in her eyes. She once mentioned to the elders of Guqin Valley her intention to come to String Pavilion to cultivate, but it was rejected. After all, this was the former residence of the String Emperor, whose position in Taishan Mountain was high above all others. Naturally, no other disciples were allowed to come here to cultivate. But she didn't expect that Miss Four would send Xinjing to String Pavilion as a musician. Although he was officially just a caretaker of the pavilion, there were still many conveniences of his job. Liyin sat down on the stone platform in the sea of clouds, her 10 slender fingers gently stroking the phoenix Guqin, then played slowly. All eyes fell upon her at once, and the elegant and crystalline sound of the phoenix was heard. It was especially moving. Under such a mood, Li Jin appeared even more dignified and beautiful. The sea of clouds rolled and turned, and the illusion of the phoenix began to manifest. A faint divine light flowed around her body. Phenomenon. When everyone saw this, they were slightly stunned. The 6 famous songs left by the String Emperor were able to evoke phenomena, so Li Jin's playing had definitely reached a certain level. Yi Futian looked quietly on the side. The phenomenon induced by Li Jin was obviously a bit different from his. It was almost there but still not pure enough. When the song was over, Li Jin still sat there, with some regret, and sighed in a low voice, "It's still lacking. You have done very well already. The 6 famous scores are not so easy to master," Qin Yu said. Li Jin nodded gently as she stood up and looked at Yi Futian. The look in her beautiful eyes was a little complicated. A simple musician had such an opportunity to come here. If it were up to her, she would also be willing to guard the string pavilion as a simple musician. Since Miss Four had sent you here, she must have high hopes for you. Concentrate on cultivating the music scores here. All 6 famous scores are as profound as they are broad. Even if you can't learn them all, it would be of great benefit to your cultivation, Li Jin instructed Yi Futian. She was a genius of Guqin Valley and of the Nirvana Plain, so she had the qualifications to instruct Yi Futian. Well, I'll do my best. Yi Futian didn't say much, just smiled and nodded. Let's go, Li Jin said and headed outside. Qin Yu also looked at Yi Futian and said, "Take this opportunity and cherish it." "Thank you." Yi Futian smiled and watched the group leave the string pavilion. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. After Yi Futian sent the group away, he returned to the rear mountain behind the string pavilion. After Yi Futian sent the group away, he returned to the rear mountain behind the string pavilion. In a quiet environment, alone, he felt a lot more comfortable. This way, no one should be offended, and there should be no one who would disturb him in the future. He was very satisfied with cultivating at the string pavilion, and indeed, he owed a great favor to the house master of Taishan. This kind of condition to cultivate was simply too perfect to be interrupted, so he would not do anything to provoke trouble to change the state of things. He would try to be as low-key and humble as possible. That way, even if someone wasn't happy with him, they would have nothing to use against him. After all, everyone was a genius on Taishan Mountain. Even if there was some discontent in their hearts, it was impossible to throw a fit without a good reason, as that would have been beneath them. "Are they gone?" a voice came. Futian turned back to look at the little phoenix that appeared behind him, saying, "Why are you here again? Wasn't she taken away by her mother?" It was attracted by the sound of the guqin, but it was far worse than you normally are. "How can you put up such a front?" Little Phoenix looked at Futian with a weird look, somewhat disdainful. "This is called keeping a low profile," Futian said with some indignity. "Who is putting up a front? Where did this little girl get her ideas from?" "Hypocrite!" Little Phoenix grunted, then turned around and disappeared just as she had appeared. This place where he cultivated was entirely her backyard. Futian smiled and shook his head, then went to a place to sit cross-legged and continue to cultivate. Just as Futian had predicted, after that day, no one came to disturb him. Even though the disciples of Taishan Mountain had some opinions of their own because an outsider came to Taishan Mountain for the first time and was able to cultivate in the string pavilion, after seeing that Futian was polite and quite gentle and respectful to the disciples of Taishan Mountain, no one had anything against him. Even as the word spread about Xinjing's low-key modesty, many people at Taishan Mountain knew that there was now a humble guardian in the string pavilion. In what seemed like a short time, Futian had cultivated on Taishan Mountain for half a year. He rarely left the string pavilion in the past half a year. Besides music cultivation, he was comprehending music scores or cultivating in other arts. But, all in all, without the distraction of mundane matters, Futian was able to concentrate and completely immerse himself in the world of cultivation. Read more chapter on Novelful and he had no choices either. Now, he couldn't do anything but work hard, because strength was the foundation of everything. His realm was even deeper, his mood was more stable, as the guqin path was very beneficial to the cultivation of the mood. At this time, above the rear mountain, on the cliff, a figure sat cross-legged and was strumming the guqin. The sound of guqin was very rapid, and there was a breath of extreme suppression between heaven and earth. The sea of clouds was also roaring and tossing as the landscape of this space, changing and morphing it. It gave the illusion that time had changed and space had moved. It seemed that the space Futian was in was a world of its own, closed off by the melody. Such a magnificent spectacle, if seen by the people of Guqin Valley, they would surely understand that this was a true natural phenomenon, inspired by the sound of the guqin, which was the worldly judgment of the 6 famous music scores of the string pavilion. This piece of music was very arrogant, and its difficulty was also extremely high. Futian has been practicing it for the longest time. Now, he basically had all 6 of them under control. Sonorous notes were still beating, but they gradually eased, and the phenomenon between heaven and earth gradually dissipated. Finally, the sound of the guqin stopped, but Futian's 10 fingers still hovered on the strings. He looked at the distant scenery and felt the passage of time. Everything was like a dream. He still remembered the last time he practiced the guqin like this. It had been with the Grandmaster at Donghai Academy. That year, he was not yet 18. He had just started to come into his own, and Jeyu was with him also. In a blink of an eye, decades had passed, and once again he was studying guqin seriously. It all seemed to be a dream. Now, his guqin path had been refined by these many years of cultivating, and he could no longer be compared to his past self. Unfortunately, all this could no longer be seen by the Grandmaster. Looking at the distant sea of clouds, Futian felt something in his heart. He took a deep breath, looked down at the score, and plucked the strings with his fingers. In an instant, a high-pitched sound of guqin penetrated the sky. The crane chanting could be heard in the high heavens. In the sea of clouds, there was a sound of a long cry. In truth, there were divine cranes that were being awakened and flew above 9 heavens as if affected by the sound of the guqin. They cried from the depth of a lake somewhere. This song was actually a chaotic nation, but the artistic conception of the music was no longer the same as it was before. The sound of the piano was lingering, and the cranes were dancing. They were surrounded by heaven and earth. In the depths of the sea of clouds, There seemed to be two pairs of extremely bright eyes penetrating the boundless infinity. Their gaze landed on Yi Futian. There were two figures standing above the clouds, a man and a woman, with extraordinary temperament. Both were wearing fiery red phoenix robes. They were the parents of little Phoenix. He had also learned worldly judgment, the woman whispered, a little startled. In half a year, he has learned all 6 famous scores. This kind of musical attainment, perhaps he himself was unaware of, the man also said, a little surprised. Compared to the string emperor of yore, he was not greatly behind. They vaguely understood that Miss Four sent Yi Futian to Taishan Mountain, perhaps not entirely because of the third young master. Yi Futian's talent in the ways of Guqin Path was really special, so he was sent here by Miss Four to come to the string pavilion for self-study. In just over half a year, he had actually learned 6 famous scores. His future was limitless, and in the future he would perhaps be another sensational figure like the string emperor. After completing the 6 famous scores, he practiced many other scores again. And on this day, Yi Futian finally walked out to the piano. However long he had been at Taishan Mountain was how long he had been cultivating in the string pavilion. This was the first time Yi Futian had experienced the scenery of Taishan Mountain. Sometimes he encountered other cultivators on the way, but he didn't know them. When he was asking for directions, these people of Taishan Mountain felt even more strange and looked at him weirdly. Who is this guy? Was he really a cultivator of Taishan Mountain? He didn't even know where the Sword Abyss was. Was he serious? Sword Abyss was located in the southern part of Taishan Mountain and was the place of sword cultivation at Taishan Mountain. The swordsmanship at Taishan Mountain was extremely prestigious. Lord Taishan had collected many sword methods, and whose own swordsmanship was also superb. The second disciple of Lord Taishan, the current city lord of Taishan City, had inherited the swordsmanship of Lord Taishan. His reputation was enough to shake the world and became a dominant lord in his own right. Therefore, when Luo Yue, the princess of the city lord's residence of Taishan City, heard that there was a powerful swordsman in the realm of ruin, she went there in person because she also cultivated in swordsmanship. Sword Abyss, as its name suggested, was an abyss. When Yi Futian came here, he saw a sword peak directly inserted into the ground. Above that giant sword peak, there were ancient palaces located at different points of the peak with excellent views. In front of the sword peak, there was a huge canyon. Below, there were many palaces for cultivation, cave residences, and a gymnasium. Yi Futian had come from the canyons below and looked up at the land above and the sword peak in front, with a slight wave in his heart. A good place, Yi Futian admired. Not only that, but the entire sword abyss was filled with the infinite breath of swordsmanship, extremely saturated. This was the real holy land of swordsmanship. Above the void over the gymnasium, an amazing battle was taking place. Above the void, a figure in blue was standing between the heavens and the earth. His fingers were pointing to the sky, and countless divine swords appeared above the sky. It was shocking to behold. Many below looked up and saw the body of his opponent sail across the void, and in an instant, like the catastrophe of swordsmanship, the void seemed to be crushed under the swords. Crisp, crackling sounds came out, and hundreds of sword marks appeared on the body of his opponent instantly, some of them even stained with blood. Great swordsmanship, Yi Futian praised inside. It was indeed worthy of Taishan Mountain's sword technique. Brother Wan's sword technique is getting stronger, the other disciples of Sword Abyss exclaimed, smiling. Even the one who was defeated just grumbled, "Thank you, senior brother, for your mercy." It seemed that he did not care about his injury at all, which was inevitable in such sparring. "Your sword progress was not inconsiderable," Brother Wan said to the defeated man. The two went down together and cleared the battlefield to allow others to go up. The cultivators stood on the sides watching the battle, and Yi Futian also stood there. The swordsmanship of the two were equally strong. It was at this time that senior brother Wan seemed to notice Yi Futian's existence. He lifted his feet to go toward Yi Futian, and the people around him suddenly realized that this person did not seem to be a cultivator from Sword Abyss. "Are you a cultivator from somewhere else in Taishan Mountain?" Wan Shi asked with some doubt. This was the first time he saw Yi Futian. He did not recall ever having seen this person on Taishan Mountain before. Xin Jing, caretaker of the String Pavilion. Pleasure to meet the brother of the way. Yi Futian bowed. Suddenly, the people around him were a bit surprised. So this was the musician in the String Pavilion. They had all heard of Xin Jing's name, but this was the first they had seen him. Disciple of the Sword Abyss, Wan Shuyi. Wan Shuyi responded to Yi Futian and saluted him in return. He said, I heard that you were cultivating in the String Pavilion. So, what brought you to Sword Abyss? I know a little about swordsmanship and have cultivated in sword techniques, and have always admired the talent of those who cultivate in swordsmanship. I knew that there was the Sword Abyss, a holy land to cultivate sword techniques on Taishan Mountain. I desired to come and take a look to see if I could gain some comprehension to help with my progress in swordsmanship, Yi Futian replied. Please do not laugh. Brother Xin is dedicated to learning, but specialization is important in cultivation, Wan Shuyi said. Since Brother Xin has the opportunity to cultivate in the String Pavilion, you should concentrate on that. Quite so, Yi Futian said, still with a smile. I am only watching from the periphery occasionally and not immersed in it, and I will still concentrate on the art of the Guqin as my main cultivation. Not to mention, in Sword Abyss, I could also practice music, and perhaps I can resonate with the cultivation of swordsmanship. Wan Shuyi glanced at Yi Futian and thought that, just as rumored, this musician of the String Pavilion was humble and gentle. He didn't expect him to be so interested in learning. No wonder Miss Four had helped him. Just as well. But you are not a disciple of the Sword Abyss, so you should take care not to step in places you shouldn't set foot in, Wan Shuyi instructed. Yi Futian nodded with a smile. Thank you, brother. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The Sword Abyss was very large and occupied one side of Taishan Mountain. Aside from what Yi Futian saw in front of him, there was also the Sword Cliffs and Sword Residence behind the Sword Peak. The Sword Abyss was very large and occupied one side of Taishan Mountain. Aside from what Yi Futian saw in front of him, there was also the Sword Cliffs and Sword Residence behind the Sword Peak. Sword Cliffs was also known as Sword Cliffs of Trials. Countless cultivators honed their swordsmanship there, leaving sword marks on many cliff walls, many of which were left by ancestors of great swordsmanship. Sword Residence, on the other hand, was the cave residence where many swordsmen cultivated. It was a blessed place, like heaven on earth. After the cave residences were emptied by the ancestors, they became unoccupied, and there were most likely records of swordsmanship comprehension inside. In addition, there were also superb sword techniques inherited from Taishan Mountain itself. Lord Taishan was knowledgeable and had many sword scriptures in his collection, some of which were definitely the most supreme. Many years ago, Lord Taishan himself was also a magical talent. Yi Futian watched the practice of swordsmanship in the Sword Abyss and watched disciples practicing. He was deep in thought. Although most of the disciples of the Sword Abyss could not beat him in swordsmanship, there must be someone among them with whom he could learn from, not to mention that their swordsmanship had been passed down from Taishan Mountain. The sword that he had just observed wielded by Wan Shuyi was extremely stunning. If the cultivation reached its peak, it would be an incredibly strong sword technique. Like the Guqin path, although he was good at it, he knew that even though he appeared powerful, his true skill was varied and unrefined. In swordsmanship, though he had combined his own comprehension and the soul-breaking sword techniques that he had acquired previously, he was relying heavily on the advantages of the way. In truth, his swordsmanship was far from sufficient, especially in the top tier of sword techniques. He was not nearly as invincible as was rumored in the realm of ruin. What do you think? Yi Futian was watching the swordplay when several disciples of the Sword Abyss approached him and asked him a question, smiling. The disciples of Sword Abyss are superb in swordsmanship, Yi Futian said with a smile. You are an expert in music, and now that you are observing the swordplay, do you have any comprehension? The person asked again. All methods are connected, including the sword techniques. Before, I saw that Brother Wan's swordsmanship was superb. After that, I saw several others' swordsmanship. Though wielded differently, they all had the shades of that one technique. I would greatly like to know if they were all from the same sword technique? Yi Futian asked. That's right. The other nodded and said with a smile, this sword technique is one that all the disciples of Sword Abyss want to learn, but the disciples of Sword Abyss are many. Those in the Saint Plane who can reach the level of Brother Wan are few at best. Even swordsmen of Renhuang realm at Taishin Mountain find it difficult to accomplish. What sword technique could be that enticing? Yi Futian asked curiously. The fleeting divine sword. The young man smiled and said, but most people can only cultivate to the first level, a glimmer of sky. This first level is the most suitable for those who understand the way of space. Its power us the strongest, the most authentic. Read more chapter on novel so it is. But Brother Wan's sword was more than a glimmer. What level is he at? Yi Futian asked. The other looked at him with a smile and said, the second level, cleave of all things. When cultivated to this level, with a single sword strike, the void will be cut into countless pieces, hence the name. How about the third? Yi Futian asked. The third level of the fleeting divine sword naturally would be fleeting. However, only very few Renhuang on Taishin Mountain have cultivated to this level. Once the sword is deployed, time flows like water, and years go by, hence the name, fling. With the fleeting divine sword, there is no countermeasure, and ultimately, this technique is also divided into different strengths. Only those who are experts at a variety of the strengths of the Great Path can reach the peak. On Taishin Mountain, only the Lord has reached the ultimate state of the fleeting divine sword. The other party smiled and explained, gazing at Yi Futian with interest. They asked, Brother Shin is interested in cultivating in this technique? Seeing how unusually powerful this sword technique is, I am a little interested. But my talent is limited. If I choose to cultivate it, I don't know which level I could reach. Yi Futian replied in a low voice and did not deny his intentions. He did not come to Sword Abyss for frivolity, but to cultivate, so there was nothing to hide. It's easy for Brother Shinjing to get started. Although the fleeting divine sword is the ultimate sword technique, the first two levels are not a secret. There will be no problem if you are interested to cultivate. Moreover, the Sword Cliffs of Trials contains many marks of previous cultivations, so you can take a look, the other added. Yi Futian nodded slightly. Thank you for telling me. It's but a small matter, the other replied with a smile. They continued, if there is any problem, Brother Shinjing can come to us. For sure, Yi Futian answered, and the other left. Yi Futian watched for a few more moments before leaving Sword Abyss. Afterward, besides practicing in the String Pavilion every day, he also watched the swordsmen in the Sword Abyss. Everyone in Sword Abyss knew now that they had a musician who liked to learn. He was also the guardian of the String Pavilion, the one Miss Four personally escorted to Taishin Mountain. Yi Futian was very quiet at Sword Abyss, spending most of his time watching the swordsmen and observing. He rarely spoke to anyone. Occasionally he would ask some questions, and his humble and studious attitude made many others like him quite a bit. After all, the disciples of Sword Abyss were mostly in the Saint Plane, and they all had extraordinary temperament. Under circumstances that did conflict with their own interests, they were more than willing to answer Yi Futian's questions when prompted. Over time, Yi Futian seemed to have become one of the disciples of Sword Abyss. Many of the cultivators of Sword Abyss were used to his existence. However, Little Phoenix was often displeased and secretly complained that Yi Futian dabbled in everything. Instead of concentrating on the Guqin path, he had now gone to the Sword Abyss frequently to study sword techniques. With no one to chat with, the Little Phoenix was deprived of some enjoyment as she greatly liked when Yi Futian played the Flight of the Phoenix Pair, with which she could resonate. Every time she heard this piece, she would feel herself progress. It was as if she, too, was moving toward the next level. On this day, a guest arrived at Sword Abyss, which was a quite lively occasion. The young mistress of City Lord's residence at Taishin City, Princess Luiyue, whose father, the City Lord of Taishin City, had inherited the swordsmanship of Lord Taishin. Previously, Luiyue had also practiced at Sword Abyss for some time. This was the place where she learned her craft, and today, The city lord of Taishan took her to visit the lord, so Luo Yue took this opportunity to revisit Sword Abyss. Many disciples at Sword Abyss knew Luo Yue, and they were accustomed to addressing each other as brothers and sisters. At this time, there was a sword cliff behind Sword Abyss and Sword Peak. Many disciples were there. This was a famous sword cliff at Sword Abyss. Upon the cliff wall, there were marks of swordsmanship left by a very powerful elder. Many would come here to observe the sword will that was contained within. Luo Yue stood in front of the cliff wall and looked at the sword cliffs. Although her father was a mighty figure in swordsmanship and derived other methods of battle from his swordsmanship, the attacks even included those of battle axe. Sometimes, however, it still required the expediency of other sects to absorb even more knowledge. Her cultivation of the fleeting of the divine had encountered a bottleneck at the second level, cleave of all things. It was difficult for her to advance any further. Therefore, she wanted to come to Taishan Mountain again, and so her father brought her. Looking at the cliff, Luo Yue's body could not help but exude a powerful sword will. The sword of eradication was wrapping around this space. For a long time, her shape flashed and pointed toward the void. Suddenly, a great amount of sword chi swept through the void. A devastating storm of sword chi now appeared, cutting through the sky above. Sister Luo Yue's sword is even more refined. It won't take long for the cleave of all things to become a reality. At this time, a voice spoke. It was Wan Shui, a disciple of Sword Abyss, addressing Luo Yue. Senior brother praises me too much. I know my level, and it is still a ways away compared to senior brother, Luo Yue whispered. She could not help but recall the swordsman she encountered in the realm of ruins. His sword was very simple, and a single sword strike sufficed. She wondered how it would compare with brother Wan Shui. There's not much difference. It is already on the verge, and a breakthrough can happen at any moment, Wan Shui said. Luo Yue, let me try the sword for you. Luo Yue looked at Wan Shui, then nodded and said, Thank you, brother. As they finished speaking, the two walked to one side and were suspended in midair. Many figures flashed over this way in preparation to watch the exchange between the two. Clearly, Wan Shui intended to use his swordsmanship to guide Luo Yue. In an instant, sword chi was everywhere, and as everyone expected, as outstanding as Wan Shui's sword, he had left some room because his goal was to guide Luo Yue, step by step. Luo Yue's sword was very similar to his, but there always seemed to be something missing. At this moment, suddenly, the sound of guqin was heard. It merged into the sword. It was as if the sound of the guqin perfectly matched the exchange of swordsmanship. Some continued to watch the swordplay, while some glanced in the direction of the music. It was Xin Jing, who had been playing often recently, and no one was surprised by it. Wan Shui and Luo Yue's swords were getting stronger. Wan Shui began to apply pressure in an attempt to force Luo Yue to unleash her sword, but Luo Yue still felt that she somehow fell short. At this moment, the sound of the guqin flowed into her ears, and an illusion appeared in her mind. The sound of music was like that of the sword. She could not help but wave her hand. In an instant, the sword light was shining, and a flash of radiant sword light also crossed Luo Yue's beautiful eyes. As her heart surged, in an instant, the sword will form her body was getting even stronger. Buzz. One sword manifested. It brightened the 9 heavens and collided with Wan Shui's sword. At this moment, the two storms intertwined. The sword was annihilated, and the battle stopped. After a while, everyone saw that the sword chi had gradually dissipated, and in the void, the two stood opposite each other. Congratulations, junior sister, Wan Shui said with a smile. Success. All the disciples were a little shocked. Senior brother Wan tried the sword for Luo Yue and successfully led her to comprehend and reach an epiphany, leading to a breakthrough in swordsmanship. Now, her strength was even more superb. At this moment, Luo Yue was still in a daze. The feeling of the sword just now. Thank you, senior brother, for trying the sword with me. Luo Yue bowed slightly to Wan Shui. You were only a step away. You would break through sooner or later. It had little to do with me. Wan Shui smiled. A single step could be a trap for a long time. Luo Yue shook her head. This was something she understood. At this time, she turned her eyes and looked at the figure on a boulder in front of the cliff. Yi Futian sat there with a guqin in front of him, but at this time the music had already stopped. She remembered the musician at Taishan Tavern, Shen Jing, and had heard that he was now guarding gyukins in the string pavilion. He was very eager to learn and had come to the sword abyss to cultivate. Was that moment just now a coincidence? Luo Yue murmured in her heart. That flash of spiritual light seemed to be guided by the sound of guqin. Shen Jing greets Princess Luo Yue. Seeing Luo Yue looking at him, Yi Futian smiled and nodded at Luo Yue. Luo Yue looked at Yi Futian, and seeing that the other did not appear out of sorts, thought that she was thinking too much. Uncle sent you to Taishan Mountain just as a musician, but there are still many opportunities. Concentrate on cultivating, Luo Yue said to Yi Futian and then left. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian remained there, his eyes on the cliff, and continued to meditate his sword techniques. Yi Futian remained there, his eyes on the cliff, and continued to meditate his sword techniques. Luo Yue was the daughter of the city lord of Taishan City, but she was not overbearing. Whether in the battle of the Realm of Ruins, or the meeting at Taishan Tavern, he had felt positive about her. Not to mention, she was also related to the house master of Taishan as a disciple of Taishan Mountain. His admission into Taishan Mountain to cultivate was a favor. When he saw that Luo Yue needed help, he was able to help her with the music without being too obvious about it. After all, even without him, Luo Yue would make a breakthrough on her own sooner or later. To him, it was just an easy task that cost him nothing, so there was no reason to be stingy. It was just as how the house master of Taishan had helped him to get to Taishan Mountain. Shen Jing, when I listened to your guqin, it matches perfectly with the battle of swordsmanship. It seemed as if I had heard nothing at all. It didn't appear to be intrusive. A person next to him said, I guess to get to this point, your expertise in guqin's superb and you must also have a deep understanding of swordsmanship? Yi Futian looked at the speaker and smiled. These days, many recognized him in Sword Abyss, so they would often talk to him. In front of the disciples of Sword Abyss, how dare I speak about the understanding of swordsmanship and show off? Yi Futian said with a smile, full of humility, as usual. The other was accustomed to it as well and smiled. Could it be that you deliberately hide yourself and your skills? I have never seen you practice the swords in Sword Abyss. The speaker's tone was very casual. They were obviously joking. I came to Sword Abyss to observe the swordplay. As for practicing, I'd better practice in secret when I go back so you guys won't laugh at me, Yi Futian responded with a smile. Many around him smiled. Yet another said, but I think that you, Shen Jing, are hiding your skills. Maybe, you have already made some achievements in swordsmanship. Yi Futian shook his head without saying anything more. His gaze continued to be fixed on the cliff wall. He was meditating. There was nothing more important than cultivation. With this opportunity for cultivation at Taishan Mountain, naturally, he would not waste it. He would use this opportunity to elevate his cultivation. On the other side, Wan Shuyi and Luo Yue left together. Luo Yue was still thinking about the breakthrough that had just happened. Although she thought it was a coincidence, that sound of guqin so perfectly helped her. Perhaps even Shen Jing himself was not aware of it. Shen Jing's music was transparent. Its mood was extraordinary, and it was indeed a talent as far as the guqin path was concerned. Perhaps this was the reason why Uncle sent him to Taishan Mountain in the first place, but it was not clear why he came to cultivate his swordsmanship. Brother Wan, what do you think of Shen Jing? Louis West. Not bad. Humble and studious, his future is promising. But it's unknown just how talented he is. But since Miss Four endorsed his entrance into Taishan Mountain, there must be something outstanding about him, Wan Shuyi responded, which was also his honest opinion. Well, there is a charm to his music. It's very pure. Luo Yue nodded slightly. Brother Wan, if you have the opportunity, keep an eye on Shen Jing. We have met once, so we knew each other, and because he was also sent by Uncle, don't let him be isolated because he's not a disciple of Taishan Mountain. Relax, Shen Jing is well liked, and many disciples of Sword Abyss also take good care of him. Wan Shi smiled. Even without your instructions, because of Miss 4, we will do what we can. Very well. Luo Yuan nodded gently. Thank you, brother. Her instruction was considered returning the favor of the other, who had no idea how he had accidentally helped her to break through the realm of swordsmanship. Best wishes for him to achieve something great here. Luiwei couldn't help but think of the mysterious swordsman in the realm of ruins. If he came to Taishan Mountain to cultivate, he would certainly have infinite potential. Unfortunately, after that day, the mysterious swordsman disappeared. How would she know that the swordsman she was thinking of was cultivating swordsmanship at Sword Abyss? It was the same person she had asked to be taken care of. Without noticing, some time had passed. Yi Futian cultivated daily. On this day, in the land behind the string pavilion, he stood on the edge of the cliff in front of the sea of clouds. He held a sword in his right hand. His palms were stretched out as if time and space were still, but there was an invisible might in the surrounding heaven and earth. It was extremely suppressed. This sense of might seemed to permeate into every corner between heaven and earth, and it was everywhere. The palms passed over, and in an instant, a dazzling golden divine light flashed and disappeared. A golden trace appeared in the sea of clouds in front of him, which seemed to be bisected, but Yi Futian's movements did not stop there. His feet moved forward, and his arms passed over again, and another golden line bisected the space. It seemed to be cut through. This was the first level of the fleeting divine sword of the ancient sword, a glimmer of sky. With each strike, a line in the void would cut through the sky. As he moved forward, Yi Futian unleashed sword strike after sword strike, and the sea of clouds turned from a state of calmness to highly turbulent, with the storm of swordsmanship tossing and turning. Countless sword marks crisscrossed. It was as if, unconsciously, the swordsmanship had transformed from the first level, a glimmer of sky, to the second level, cleave of all things. After a moment, Yi Futian stopped and stood quietly above the sea of clouds. You practiced this long and this is it? At this time, a clear voice was heard, and Yi Futian knew that it was the little phoenix. He looked up to Feng Yan, feeling the breath that came from the other. There was a smile in his eyes. You broke through? Yes, now I'm the same as you, Feng Yan said with swagger. Not bad. You broke through without even realizing it, Yi Futian said under his breath, a little envious in his heart. This kind of talent for cultivation was something that even many geniuses could not possess. The natural-born saint was indeed powerful. That's because I am the divine phoenix. Feng Yan held her head up high and looked at Yi Futian with some contempt. Unlike you, instead of practicing Guqin Path, you ran over to Sword Abyss to practice swordsmanship, and after such a long time, your fleeting divine sword is still at this level. Did you just pass the first level? Yi Futian looked confounded. Was he being made fun of? He looked at the little phoenix with a smile. It seemed that after the breakthrough, Feng Yan was a little puffed up. At this moment, Feng Yan was staring at him without blinking. Judging from her posture, she was clearly a little excited and wanted to give it a try. Do you also know of the fleeting divine sword? Yi Futian asked with a smile. There are many at Sword Abyss who know of this sword technique in Taiyuan Mountain, so how could I not? Feng Yan said proudly. Yi Futian nodded. The disciples of Sword Abyss had also claimed that there were many who had cultivated the fleeting divine swords, but few were able to accomplish it because its power was great. So all those who cultivated in swordsmanship wanted to learn it, but very few were ever able to reach the peak of its power. But since you know this technique, how about we give it a try? Yi Futian said with a smile. Great. Just as Yi Futian had guessed, Feng Yan came because she was eager to try it. Now, seeing as how Yi Futian offered, she immediately agreed. This time, she would make this guy so embarrassed. It would be a change from his usual air of haughtiness. Let's get started. Feng Yan seemed a bit impatient, and the moment her words faded, Yi Futian instantly felt the temperature between heaven and earth rise sharply. In just a moment, it was like a furnace. An imaginary divine flame enveloped the world, and Yi Futian seemed to be wrapped within it. There was a long whistle, the whistle of the phoenix reached the 9 heavens. A giant illusion of the divine phoenix appeared above the sky. The sea of clouds was branded red under the flames, and Yi Futian's body also seemed to be burning. However, he was still standing there quietly, extremely calm. With some movement from his mind, sword will traversed the vast space. It was seemingly everywhere. The sharp whistling of the sword came out, a little piercing. The entire void was filled with an extremely sharp breath. I'm going to make a move. Yi Futian looked at Feng Yan. I'm going to make a move too. Feng Yan's pupils were burning with divine flames that shot toward Yi Futian's eyes. Yi Futian felt his will was also burning. He smiled as he stepped forward, disappearing in an instant, and the sword in his hand also sailed across with his body. Boom! The divine flame on Feng Yan also exploded at this moment, burning the world, but Yi Futian's figure disappeared in front of her. She found out, much to her shock, that in an instant Yi Futian's illusions were all around her. It was as if he was everywhere, and everywhere he passed, his sword did too. An extreme sense of danger came over her, and Feng Yan's face changed suddenly. She felt that the space she was in seemed to be shattering. She was in a prison forged by cleave of all things. Countless crisscross sword marks were about to smash this space. Dad, Mom! Feng Yan closed her eyes and shouted. Buzz! A figure disappeared in a flash, and Yi Futian pulled Feng Yan's body out of there as if intentionally leaving a gap. Below, the space was cut into countless fragments as if completely pulverized. Feng Yan opened her eyes and looked down, rather fearful. Then she raised her eyes and stared at Yi Futian angrily. You were playing for real? Yi Futian looked at her innocently. You actually had the heart to strike. Feng Yan was extremely upset. Yi Futian had no response. 2 extremely dominant authorities of heaven descended, and a pair of phoenix demon emperors appeared in front of Yi Futian. Yi Futian's mouth twitched. Was she calling her parents again? How could they play? Xinjing greets has the elders. Yi Futian's heart was galloping, but on the surface, he was still politely showing his respect. 2 demon emperors stared at him. Their pressure of might bloomed. One could only imagine how much pressure Yi Futian felt at this moment and how wronged he felt. Dad, Mom, he bullied me, Feng Yan said aggrievedly in a weepy voice. Yi Futian was almost weeping himself. How shameless. You want to show off and now you are in trouble? The mother phoenix said to Feng Yan. It was not a bad thing for this girl to taste some hardships. She did not know her limit. Elder is wise. Yi Futian was grateful. As heaven was his witness. When did he bully Feng Yan? You are not some good bird yourself. She is but a child. Why did you unleash such strong technique? The mother phoenix stared at Yi Futian and asked. Yi Futian looked stunned, and he really wanted to rebuke with something like, you are the bird, and in fact your whole family is, but he dared not. Feng Yan a child? As a mother, she was on the side of her child no matter what. You learned your sword technique from Sword Abyss? Feng Yan's father asked. Yes. Yi Futian nodded, and the other fell silent. The 2 demon emperors looked at each other, and their hearts were a little shocked. This guy had learned all 6 famous songs, and in such a short time, he had achieved the 2nd level of the fleeting divine sword. Was he here to guard the string pavilion, or was he here to steal the art? If this continued, would all the secret inheritances of Taishan Mountain be stolen? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.